Hello, lovely people. Welcome to another episode of Book Chat, the regular roundup of stuff I've read at some point in my past.
Sophie Vlogs.
I have 3 books I want to talk about this week, and they're all quite different genre-wise, so I'm just going to dive into it, and I'm going to go from youngest to oldest. So, I'm going to start with The Wild Way Home by Sophie Kirtley. This is a middle grade novel, I would say potentially the slightly younger end of middle grade. This is a Stone Age time slip novel, which I just thought was such a cool concept, and I realised that I have never really read anything set in the Stone Age before, so this was a fun time. This follows Charlie, and Charlie's baby brother, Dara, is born, but there is something wrong with Dara's heart, so he's going to have an operation, and Charlie is very distressed about this, and Charlie ends up sort of running away, and in running away, they fall through time, and they end up in the Stone Age, and they meet this Stone Age boy, and together it's just a case of like surviving the Stone Age and also helping out this boy, and through doing so, Charlie really like addresses the distress and stuff, and that's one thing that I thought that this book did really, really well. I thought this was such a compassionate exploration of like sadness and anger and grief, and in a way that kids will be able to really process and understand, because through helping this Stone Age boy, Charlie's really able to process all of these overwhelming emotions, which is what led them to run away from the hospital in the first place. And I just thought this was a book that gave a lot of time in a way that I think is a really great level for kids to really connect to, because you know, when things that are distressing happen, sometimes you get really angry about them, and sometimes that's something that you need to feel before you can then really move through into like grief, and then into like acceptance, and then into like moving beyond things and that sort of thing. So I thought that aspect was handled really lovely. In regards to the time slip novel itself, I really enjoyed reading a book set in the Stone Age. It was a fun thing. I felt like this is a book that didn't have necessarily the most plot. I thought that they were going to go on slightly more of an adventure than they went on, but I realised that's because there is like strife in this, and there are things they have to overcome, but the whole point of this journey is this like emotional journey of like addressing these feelings and showing how you can like process and deal with them and that sort of thing. So this was a really lovely read. I thought it was really sweet. After that is a book I did not like so much. This is Stolen by Lucy Christopher. I know I'm in the minority here, because the reviews on Goodreads for this are glowing. There are so many 5 stars and 4 stars, so I will preface this by saying this is not my go-to genre. This is about a girl, Gemma, who was drugged and abducted by a stalker at an airport, who takes her to this very remote part of Australia and then is like keeping her prisoner, which is not a genre I really read, because it's not a genre that I super enjoy. However, I have read books with similar concepts that I did think were very well written. For example, my main comparative point for this would be The Collector by John Fowles, which is a book for adults, whereas this is a book for teens, but it's a book for adults that explores the concept of this guy who comes into a lot of money, and then just like through a bunch of decisions that he makes, abducts a woman and keeps her in his basement. And one thing that I thought that book did well, that I kind of wished this book did more of, was it managed to show you the way in which this person is a product of their upbringing and that sort of thing. But the thing about The Collector is that it always showed you that everything that this person was doing was a very conscious choice. So although you have moments where the narrative lulls you into kind of feeling sympathy for him, you know, in this manipulative way where it's like he is presenting his narrative to you, and you find moments where you're like, oh, I was really sympathizing with him for a minute there, and then I remembered that he abducted a woman. You know, like, I felt like what I liked about The Collector that made me think it was a well-written book was how it played around with that, but at the end of the day, if you read it close enough, you're like, oh yeah, everything about this is a choice. There's nothing to be sympathetic to, really, because this is a human being making choices to the detriment of this other person. One thing that I struggled with this, it felt like we were given this, Ty was giving his backstory, and I appreciated that this backstory is showing you the way that he's come to be who he is and how he is and why he made this decision, but I felt like it was also going really hard on the he's a tortured and misunderstood man, and isn't he handsome and gorgeous, in a way that was slightly less critical. So there were just a lot of reviews on Goodreads, and I'm not here to slam how other people read. That's not generally what I choose to do with my time, because we all consume media differently. I was slightly concerned by the sheer number of reviews on Goodreads that were uncritically like, boy, isn't Ty sexy, I wish he'd abduct me, and I'm not exaggerating. Just, that's not me taking the piss out of people, those are things that people are saying, and I felt conflicted about that. I think one thing I felt this book was trying to do was it was trying to show you, like, in many ways, Stockholm Syndrome, and how through these traumatic experiences you can, like, create this connection with, like, your captor and stuff like this. I just don't necessarily feel like it fulfilled that properly. I don't know. I just feel like there are a lot of people who think that he's really sexy and tortured and hot, and I feel like if he was, like, portrayed less as, like, hot, attractive young man and maybe, like, creepy, ugly older man, we'd be having very different readings with the exact same actions. I don't know. A thing I did like about this is I did think that the descriptions of Australia and the scenery and stuff like that were really beautiful. I thought that there were some lovely moments there. I just really, it's not my type of genre, I recognise that. I felt extremely little sympathy for Ty. I felt like everything he was saying was extremely manipulative, and really when you actually read the words he was saying, I was like, there's nothing romantic about stalking someone since they were 10 years old. No. There's nothing romantic about realising you're sexually attracted to them when you save them from a sexual assault moment. No. So I would not recommend this. I especially would not recommend this for teens, and I didn't like it. The final book I want to talk about is The Fourth Dimension by Yannis Ritsos. Yannis Ritsos is a Greek writer. This is translated by Peter Green and Beverly Bardsley. I have this book because when I was in university, I did a module on modern Greek literature, because I did English and classical studies, so I did a lot of ancient Greek stuff. But it was really interesting to do a module on, like, contemporary Greek writing and who are some of these really foundational Greek writers. This is a series of dramatic monologues, so it's kind of poetry, but it's also kind of like monologues. And it's drawing on both, like, ancient Greek stuff from, like, mythology and stuff like this, but it's also drawing on a lot of Yannis Ritsos's life experiences and stuff like that. Two of my favourites were Moonlight Sonata, which is potentially his most famous work, and also I particularly liked Agamemnon. This is one of those things where I think this is objectively very well written, and as I was reading it, occasionally I was like, I don't feel like I know enough to fully draw everything out of these texts. So I really appreciated the introduction, because I felt like the introduction gave a lot of context for stuff that is, like, from his own life that he's weaved in. And then I was using a lot of my own knowledge of Greek myth to sort of, like, interpret some of the ways that things are being played out as well. And I kind of felt like a lot of this felt like existing in this, like, shadowy, otherworldly realm. Each of the monologues has, like, it's almost like a play. They have, like, an intro and an outro, which is, like, in italics, that is sort of, like, setting the scene. And it's like, oh, you know, like, young man is visiting this woman in this place, or something. And then you have this dramatic monologue from the perspective of one of these people, and then it sort of closes it out again at the end with sort of, like, closing stage direction. The way that it is melding together both this mythology, the personal aspects from his life, the ancient with more contemporary, it really did feel like we were exploring these monologues in these otherworldly, shadowy, liminal spaces. It was like stepping into this place that was slightly apart from the rest of the world. And I felt very interesting. Like, as I was reading these, a lot of them, I was like, this is really interesting as a piece of media. I don't know how much I really connected to most of them. Some of these I really felt a strong connection to. A lot of them I sort of felt like I was reading slightly from a distance, because it's in this, like, shadowy liminal space anyway, and then I'm trying to, like, read in, like, the interpretations of myth and the deviations and that sort of thing. I don't know, it was one of those ones where I think that this will be really interesting to study, because I feel like there's a lot here that I didn't necessarily pick up on. So this is one that I'm going to keep, and it's one that I hope to return to at a later date in a couple of years, maybe when I've developed more as a reader as well, and then I can go back through and see what else I can pick out of this. But definitely very interesting. And one of the goals I set myself on my birthday resolutions was to read more translated fiction. So I thought I would start with translated fiction that I owned. An extremely interesting text and an interesting form, and not a form that I've really read a lot of. Yeah, it's given me a lot to mull over. I still don't really quite know what to make from it, but I enjoy reading things that sometimes challenge you. You know, like both of these are genres which I don't read a lot of and that I found a bit challenging. I think that I liked this a lot more because I just felt like it was really exploring some really interesting things, whereas I just struggled with this because I felt like we were just really like verging on really romanticizing this guy. Although there were times when I felt like we weren't romanticizing him, but then we did. I just don't know. So yes, those are just 3 books I wanted to talk about. I would love to hear your thoughts on more in the comments down below. But that's it for me this week. As per usual, I hope you're having a really, really lovely day, and I will see you next time for something different.